All right, so we're going to talk about Peakmaster today. So I've got it queued up here, and the thing with Peakmaster is it's actually a very simple game from the terms of like what you're listening for. All it's doing is it's boosting a particular frequency, a certain amount, and then you have to guess, what the peak of that frequency filter is. That's it. So what I want to show you really quick is I hooked this thing up to Smart so that you could see what's actually happening, because I was curious, how narrow are these filters? So I hooked it up to Smart, and here's what Smart said. So here are 4 different, examples from one of the Peakmaster games I played. So this is a 1.2 kilohertz drill, so you can see it is a 14 dB boost, which is a lot. It's boosting the frequency 14 dB. But the other question I had was, how narrow is this filter? And it turns out it is a 5th octave filter. So here is, let me turn this off. There we go. So here's the 5th octave filter. And a 5th octave filter is a Q of 7.2. If you wanted to sort of like do some practicing for Peakmaster to kind of help you visualize what's happening, you could load something up in Logic or Pro Tools or something and do some peak filtering. You're going to do 14 dB filters and boost filters, and you're going to dial in a Q of 7.2 on the EQ. So that's what this looks like. Now, the other thing to just kind of compare it against is this is what a 3rd octave filter looks like. This would be like what you would do if you were going to just boost on a graphic EQ, like a 31-band graphic EQ. This is the filter you'd get. If you're going to do a 10-band graphic EQ, this would be the octave band filter. So you can see it's actually pretty narrow what you're listening for in Peakmaster. And you measure the width of these EQ filters based on the 3 dB down point. So if this is the peak, we go down at 14 dB. If we look for 11, it's here, right? So this would be one side of the filter. This would be the other side of the filter. So that width, that's when I say it's a 5th octave, that's what I mean. A 5th octave between the 3 dB down points. But as you can see, it's picking up a lot of other frequencies along the way to get to that peak. So that's something to just keep in mind, that what you're listening for is, and trying to pick, is this frequency, the one right at the top here. But the reason they give you a pretty wide capture range, especially in the early stages of the game, is because they're really manipulating a pretty wide area of frequencies. Now, here's something else I confirmed in my goofing around here. The width of the filter does not change as you go up in levels on Peakmaster. So the filter you get at level 1 is the same filter you get all the way up at level 20 or higher, as far as I can tell, is this 5th octave filter. So that doesn't change. So that's the first thing I just wanted to let you see, is what you're actually listening for, what it's doing. It's a pretty narrow filter. But the other thing to notice is, even though it's narrow, it does, I want to just get a sense of the overlap here. I mean, here are 4 filters in the same game, and you can see how much overlap there really is between them. It's even for as narrow as it is taking a good chunk of frequencies and manipulating them. You're just listening for that perfect 14 dB peak. All right, so let's take a look at the game now. So the first thing is, just like when we were talking about in DB King, I think one of the secrets to Peakmaster is memorizing some keyframes or some points of reference. So I would use this practice mode to do that. And I'm going to use the songs samples, just because that gives you can hear lots of different instruments sound at the same time. So if I start the practice mode here, what I want to do is listen for octave bands. So the first octave band I want to listen for is 1 kilohertz. Okay, so that's a 14 dB boost at 1 kilohertz. So there's like nothing. There's 1 kilohertz. So I kind of think that 1 kilohertz sounds sort of like, you know, the sound happening in a small box, right? So if you were to sort of like talk into your hands or into a little box, that's what it sounds like to me. Sound inside of a small box, okay? If we go down to 500 hertz, that's like sound inside of a big box, like a shoe box or something. So there's 1 kilohertz, 500 hertz. The next one would be 250. So 250 hertz to me sounds like it's like the fundamental frequency of your average human voice, I think. It's what you would really consider kind of solid low mid range. It's not quite bass yet. So that compared to 500, which is the big box, and 1K, which is the small box. Now, so the next octave would be 120. 120 hertz sounds to me like, I would describe this as the rounded bass, the sort of like tubby round bass sounds. The kind of bass sounds you tend to not want a whole lot of because it sounds kind of just messy and yucky, okay? So compared to the 250, there's your 120. So the next octave would be 63 or 62. This is the really good bass, right? This is where the really good sounding low bass is that you sort of can't get enough of, right? I'll have as much of this as I can get. Thank you very much, right? It's really good low bass compared to kind of that round tubby bass that you get at 120. All right, so going back up to 1 kilohertz, I'm back in the small box again. So my next octave would be 2 kilohertz. So here's the thing about 2 kilohertz. From 2 to 3 kilohertz, this is the resonant frequency of your ear. Okay, so this range of 2 to 3 kilohertz, this should jump out at you, right? This should be the frequency that kind of makes you go, because your ear canal resonates there. So at 1K, you've got sound in the small box, and then suddenly at 2K, you know, it's like, whoa, there is the definition. There is, you know, my ear is very comfortable there. It likes that frequency. It resonates that frequency. In some ways, it's kind of uncomfortable because your ear is responding so much to it. So that 2 to 3K range is for me, every time it comes up, I kind of go, you know, because it just seems like it smacks me. The next octave would be 4. 4K, this is where all of the really good intelligibility is. So all of the consonants of the words, all of the transients of all of the instruments are all there. So 1K is the small box. 4K is all of the clarity and intelligibility. Your next octave is 8. This is like all the really crisp stuff, like just the edges of all the symbols, all the S's and T's are up here. And then this is your age test. If I can take it up to the next octave, 16 kilohertz. Depending on how old you are, you might hear something here. I don't hear much at all here, okay? I'm losing my ability to hear much up here at 16 kilohertz. But there's not a whole lot happening. If you can hear anything, it's just, really, really thin and crisp, high-end stuff. You have to you really have to pay attention to notice it. And I have noticed that in SoundGym, they don't take a whole lot of stuff up this high. There's not a whole lot of the drills they give you that are going to take you up to 16K. They're never going to go much past 12 in those cases. Okay. Okay, so I think that's something to just take a little bit of, if you're having trouble getting past a level in Peakmaster, take a little time with that practice mode and just go through and memorize those octave bands again, right? 63 Hertz, 120, 250, 500, 1K, 2K, 4K, 8K. Just go through and listen to those ones again. Get a sense of where those are. The interesting thing about the way that we hear is that we like to imagine that we have better resolution in our hearing than we actually do. So even though I could go through and sweep all that frequency spectrum and you could hear a difference between each of those ones, if I were to just give you, if I were to just give you 1 kilohertz boost, take it away, and then give you 1500 hertz and take it away, you would have a hard time knowing that there was a difference between those two. If you heard one and then it went away, and then heard the next one and then it went away. If you compared them directly, you would hear a difference. The reason is there's the critical bands, the critical bandwidth of our hearing tends to like to collapse these different frequencies together when they're within about a 3rd octave range. So anything that's less than a 3rd octave range, we have a harder time discriminating between those two things. So don't beat yourself up too much about needing to know every little frequency, because it's just really hard to do. So being able to identify an octave band in general is about all you need to be able to do. Okay? If you can get really good at identifying those octave bands, then it's really just kind of going, it's kind of there, but a little bit higher than this thing I know. And then you'll usually get pretty good. All right, so let's take a shot at this. Let's look at the keyboard shortcuts really quick. There's not very many in Peakmaster, but they're still useful. You get the arrow keys, which can turn the EQ on and off, which is a lot quicker than using your mouse. And then you can turn off the sound completely if you need to using the V. And if you don't like the sound effects, you can use F for that. So let's take a listen here. Okay, so I'm just going to toggle it off. Listen to it for a second. Toggle it off. Okay, so that is higher than my small box 1K, right? So I don't think it's quite that 4K. I don't think it's quite that 4K really, high intelligibility range. It's somewhere between this 2K and 4K. Maybe that's kind of my guess. It's in that range where it's resonating in my ear. Okay, I was really close, right? Okay, here's another one. Okay, so this is below the 500. This is lower than the big box, right? It's not as low as the 120 though. It's probably closest to my 250 hertz that I learned. And so what you notice in Peakmaster is you see this, the dark shaded area. That is the area where if you click right now, if the correct answer is anywhere inside that gray area, you will get credit for that point, okay? So when you're first starting out with Peakmaster, you don't have to get it perfect to get the point. You have to be within 2 octaves to get it right, which is a really, really wide margin of error. As you go up in levels, that gets narrower. So let's see if we can guess this one here. So I'm going to guess somewhere in this, maybe a little higher than 250. Okay, it was 290. That's pretty close to what I was before. It's really close to the same thing. 275. It didn't move much at all. Still in that same range. Might have gotten a little bit higher. So what I like to do is I like to try to, when that answer comes up for the one that I did, I try to look at what that answer was and remember what that sounded like. So when the next one comes up, I listen to how much it moved from beyond that, right? And that helps me know which direction I'm going to go. This sounds like it's somewhere between the little box and the big box. There we go. So that's higher than I was before, a lot higher. So it's higher than the 2 kilohertz that resonates in my ear. It sounds a little bit higher than the 4K even, I think. I'm not sure if it's quite the 8K, but it's definitely somewhere between the 4 and the 8. Let's see. It was. Hey, really close to 8K. Okay, this sounds like my small box, my 1K small box. There you go. Okay, this is that bass. It's not quite that 120 low tubby bass that's really ugly, but it's close. It's somewhere between there and the 1 and the 250. I just put it right in the middle of those two things and I got it. Okay, this sounds like my big box, right? My big box 500 hertz. That was close, it was 700. Okay, this one sounds like my 250, right? That low mid kind of sound. Really close. Okay, this is maybe a little bit bigger box than my 500 hertz big box, but it's definitely not as low as 250. So I'm going to go somewhere in between there. There we go. Okay, really, really high frequency stuff. This is somewhere in between that 8 and 16K. There's that boxy sound again, right? It's not quite my small box. It's not quite my big box either. I think it's somewhere here. There we go. Oh, here it is. It's jumping out at me. It's resonating in my ear. It's somewhere up here between that 2 and 4K. 4K. Okay, that's lower, and it's still feeling like that resonance in my ear, so I'm going to guess around 2K. Okay, so this one sounds, it's lower than my big box. I don't think it's quite that ugly 120 hertz bass. So it's somewhere in that 250 range. Let me listen to it again. Yeah, it's right in there somewhere, 218. Oh, it's like hurting my ears because it's resonating so much. I know it's got to be between that 2 to 3K range, right? Oh, it's close to 4. I got it though because I was still within. Okay, this sounds like my big box, my 500 hertz big box. So one thing to notice is my capture window has gotten narrower. Now I'm on stage 4. You see how it used to be 2 octaves. Now it's more like, an octave and a half wide. So my tolerance for getting a right answer is narrower now. Okay, this is really high stuff. This is somewhere up here in this high range. 6K. This sounds somewhere in between my big box and my little box. There we go, got it. Okay, stage 5, here we go. Okay, this is the bass sound, right? It's lower than my 250. It's not that good 63 Hertz bass though. It's somewhere around here. It's somewhere in that 120 ugly bass sound. So this is lower than my big box 500 Hertz. It's somewhere in here. There we go. Okay, really high frequency again. All I'm hearing is the cymbals, right? It's up here somewhere. There they go. Okay, I gotta be getting closer. It's gotta be like the last one, or maybe second to last one. There's that box sound again, right? It sounds like it's inside the shoebox. It's somewhere around here. Still got one more. So this is not quite that ugly 120 Hertz bass. I'm not sure it's as high as the 250. It's somewhere in between. There we go. I did it! Now I'm on level 4. Okay. So let's log out now, and I'll log into my other account, and you can see what the higher level looks like. You can watch me really bomb. So here we go. Let's go into Peak Master. I'm not going to editorialize this one much. It won't take long. So I'm on level 22. I'm going to do the same samples, and let's just see what we get here. So you see how narrow my capture range is getting, just even on stage 2? I mean, there's not a lot of room for me to make many mistakes here. So So I'm using the exact same strategies here as I was using before. I'm not really changing. I don't have as much room to make mistakes. And I'm done already. So there you go. I do find, for what it's worth, when you get to these higher levels, you do have to take quite a bit more time to just listen, right, and think about it. I was going pretty fast there. Where, earlier levels, when you've got a 2-octave capture range, you can almost just like guess wildly and get it right. But when you get up to these higher levels, I mean, you've got to sit and really listen to it, toggle it on and off, remind yourself of those keyframes, and do what you can to get as close as you possibly can to that peak, because you don't have a whole lot of room to make a mistake. But I would recommend, when you go in every once in a while, to go ahead and do that practice mode, especially when you're having a hard time passing a level. Just pull this up and remind yourself of what these sound like again. 1K, 500, 250, 120, 63, 2K, 4K, 8K, 16, right? Just take a minute, remind yourself of what those are, and then play the game. I think you'll find that you'll do a lot better if you just take that time to remind yourself of those octave band keyframes first, then play the game, and you'll do much better. All right, any questions? Anything anyone else wants to see while I've got this up here? Alrighty. Well, hopefully that helped. And for those of you who are going to watch the recording, I hope this helps you get better at Peakmaster. Remember, if you can get to level 15, I will give you 8 workout credit. So put some extra time in on Peakmaster, Distorted Reality, Reverb Wizard, and what was the fourth one that I'm having? Oh, DB King. Oh, right? Do those 4 and you'll get to level 15. I'll give you credit. All right. See you later.
See you.